Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Ryan Law. I am the president of the Wisconsin Forum, and I am extremely excited to introduce our very special guest this evening. Lehr is the science director at the Heartland Institute and is no stranger to the Wisconsin Forum. This will be the third time he has been our guest, and he is back by popular demand. Jay is an internationally renowned speaker, scientist, and author who has testified before Congress on dozens of occasions on environmental issues and has consulted with nearly every agency of the national government, as well as many foreign governments. Jay is a leading authority on groundwater hydrology. After graduating from Princeton University at the age of 20 with a degree in Geological Engineering, he went on to receive the nation's first Ph.D. in groundwater hydrology from the University of Arizona. He later became executive director of the National Association of Groundwater Scientists and Engineers. Jay is the author of more than 1,000 magazine and journal articles and 36 books. He is the editor of Rational Readings on Environmental Concerns, McGraw-Hill's Handbook on Environmental Science, Health, and Technology, the 6-volume Water Encyclopedia, and Wiley's International Sciences, or Wiley Intersciences Nuclear Energy Encyclopedia, Science, Technology, and Applications. Jay has spoken in front of thousands of audiences on topics ranging from global warming, biotechnology, to business management, health, and even physical fitness. He was featured in Parachute magazine, you read that right, Parachute magazine, in March of 2010 for setting a new world record, having jumped from an airplane each and every month for 32 years. But tonight, Jay will speak on a slightly different subject than he has in the past. A subject surrounding the ever-mysterious character we know as Elon Musk. Topics sure to be broached will include buzzwords like renewable energy, Hyperloop, SpaceX, electric sports cars, solar energy, colonizing Mars, Tesla Motors, the singularity, and artificial intelligence. Interesting topics, no doubt, and part of a story surrounding an interesting character, told to us by a man who I think could be one of the most interesting people you will ever meet. Please join me in giving Jay Lehr a warm Wisconsin Forum welcome.
Huge turnout. This is very exciting. And it's really exciting. We have a bunch of young high school students here. Ryan and I were chatting about 6 months ago when he invited me back for the third time and about what I might talk about. And somehow in the conversation, it came up that I had been studying Elon Musk and trying to determine if he was a genius or a con man. Clearly, he is both, and so I'll tell you the end at the beginning, and I will prove that to you beyond a shadow of a doubt in the following 45 minutes. Let's see, we're starting a few minutes late. I still get 45, don't I?
Oh, yeah.
Vicky, okay. It's a fascinating story. And I'm going to give you a lot of information. You'll remember some of it, you won't remember other of it, but I wrote a detailed outline, and if anybody afterwards, you all have my card, so if anyone wants to email me and would like an outline of my talk, I'd be happy to type it up and send it to you. It would be useful to me as well. As Ryan said, I'm from the Heartland Institute. We are a free market think tank. We're located in a suburb of Chicago. Arlington Heights. We've been in business for 34 years. I've been their science director for 23 years, and we deal in problems with health care and tax and budget, school reform, education, and it's all about being a free market, keeping everybody free and the government as much as possible out of our pocketbook. We don't do no lobbying. We're rather thrilled that Mr. Trump was elected. If you're not a real Trump fan, I have a recommendation for you. Tomorrow morning, wake up and believe that Mrs. Clinton won the election. You will immediately feel better about Mr. Trump. I am the world's leading optimist, which Ryan pointed out why. My skydiving record extended for 34 years and 11 months before I broke my hip in a bicycle wreck, and they had to put a couple of giant nails in my hip to close up the fractures. And the surgeon who knew of my skydiving record said it was over, that the opening shock of my parachute, if I jumped in the next 2 months, I'd never walk again. So I ended the record at 34 years and 11 months. 3 months later, I started jumping again, and I jokingly say that I'm back on a new, trying to get a new record. I'm going to be 114 to do that. My next jump will be on Saturday, because Saturday is safety day at every jump center in America. The second Saturday, every skydiver meets at their jump center and reviews things to try to save their lives. It's really a very safe sport. We only lose about 10 people a year in 3 million jumps, but it's still terrifying. I'm going to be talking all aspects of Mr. Musk. He has entered into so many businesses, it's astounding. I've told people that I worry about him because he's going to be facing a lot of failure and a lack of support, whether it's a year or 5, I don't know, but it has to happen. But a little bit about his background. When he was born and raised in South Africa. When he was 4 years old, his parents thought he was deaf. And the reason was he was always off somewhere in his mind and didn't hear people or things going on around him. That was not the case. When he was 11, he made a video game, sold it for $500. But he went on to develop the equivalent of PayPal. He first merged it into PayPal with Peter Thiel, who figured that out. And he made a few $100 million of dollars, and he invested the money in starting the Tesla motor car company and the space exploration company that we know as SpaceX, and also a solar company called Solar City, which he gave to his cousin, who ran it into the ground, and so they merged it into Tesla later on. He has spent $72 million buying 5 homes in Bel Air, one of which he uses to homeschool his 5 sons. He had twins and triplets by his first wife, and he's really big on education, but he's homeschooling them in I don't think he's doing it, he has people doing it, but it's kind of interesting. Another couple of interesting facts, he bought the James Bond car from the spy who loved me, and you might remember it was the car that drove down the beach into the water and then moved, I don't know whether it was a submarine or just moved on the water, but he paid $866,000 for it, and was very disappointed to find out that he couldn't drive it down into the water and have it run. He actually thought it worked the way it was in the film. He's now rehabilitating it and hopes eventually to have a car that will turn into a submarine. His mother is famous, and nobody knows that. Is there anyone here who's heard of his mother? I see 2 hands. His mother is the face of CoverGirl Cosmetics. She's worked for Clinique and Revlon. And from the day he was born, 48 years ago, she became a prominent model. She's now 69 years old. She's had a nutrition company for 45 years. I'm surprised that she doesn't get more publicity, but he comes from good stock. There's no question about that. I compare his theory of business, this is interesting, to Stephen Curry. Raise your hand if you've never heard of Stephen Curry. A few of you. He is now arguably the second most famous professional basketball player with the fellow in Cleveland. What's his name?
Michael Jordan.
Anyway, LeBron James. Curry is arguably the second most famous. And Curry is just a slight little fellow who joined the league really quick. But in the NBA, there's a line around the basket, way out. And if you throw the ball up from behind that line and it goes in, you get 3 points instead of 2. And most of you know that you normally only got 2 up until, I don't know, it's 20 years now. But Stephen Curry figured something out, that if he didn't stand by the line to throw the ball up, but backed up a few feet, people wouldn't come out to cover him. They'd figure, well, he's 3 feet further away than the three-point line, he's not going to make it. And when they finally found out he could make it from 3 feet behind the three-point line, they would come out and cover him, and now they were too far out, and they screwed up their defense, and he just became almost the league's top scorer and super famous. What does that have to do with Elon Musk? Well, Musk figured out that all his businesses and all the things he did, he wanted to be without competition. He wanted to try new things where he did not have competition. Now, he started his PayPal company was called X.com. There was a competitor, and he sold out and made a fortune doing it. But by and large, the Tesla electric car, raise your hand if you do not know where the word or name Tesla comes from, because this is, everybody know, a few of you do not know. Well, Tesla was in the same time as Thomas Edison, actually smarter but not as good a businessman. He died broke, but he was a genius, and really he invented alternating current. It was kind of nice that Elon Musk named his car company after Tesla. So his idea was to make a fabulous electric car, which he certainly succeeded in doing. The company is worth about the same as General Motors, over $50 billion. It produces almost exactly 2% of the amount of cars that General Motors does. And yet the stock is that high. His space exploration company, which is really quite successful, is worth $21 billion. Both of them work on government handouts. A friend of mine met somebody who had a Tesla, and the fellow was bragging about how great the Tesla was, and my friend said to him, "You're welcome." And the fellow looked at him and said, "Why did you say you're welcome when I told you about my Tesla?" Because he said, "I paid for part of your Tesla, because Tesla exists on government handouts, made up of a $7,500 federal tax credit, made in California. There are huge state subsidies. And more than that, in California, every business is allowed so many carbon dioxide credits. They call them carbon credits because they want you to think they're talking about soot, when in fact they're talking about carbon dioxide. So every business gets so many of these credits, and because the Tesla motor vehicle doesn't produce carbon dioxide, he sells the credits, and that's why he's able to produce a fabulous car for only, well, it's funny, if you go to the website, it'll say $71,000. I did some research, and I couldn't find anyone that bought it for under $91,000, and it really cost, most of them going out the door cost about $100,000, and he couldn't have done what he has done without all these benefits, which ultimately come from your taxes and everybody else's taxes. So whether he's a fraud or not, he certainly knows how to game the system. I mean, he's brilliant at taking advantage of everything that he can. He started a battery factory in the state of Nevada gave him, listen to this one, $1.2 billion in tax breaks. I mean, essentially handed him $1.2 billion to build the battery factory. It makes batteries for $6,000 that will power your home for a day. They're not selling well, but since he basically got the factory for free and will do other things with them. He's doing kind of crazy things now, and one of which some of you have probably heard of, and this is called the Hyperloop. He started a new company called the Boring Company, and he's boring a large hole starting in New York City and going all the way underground to Washington, D.C. I think he's only gone about 50 feet so far, and he will put people in a capsule, and within a few minutes, you will get from New York to Washington, D.C. That will never happen. He will never succeed, but he's doing it. He's raised money for it. All of you are familiar with the vacuum tube capsule if you have gone to the drive-through window of your bank to make a deposit or get some money. You'll see there's a capsule that you put your check in or whatever it is you're doing, and you put it back in, and a vacuum sucks it into the bank. So it's the same idea. He figured he can suck people in a capsule in this tunnel, and boy, I'll bet all the tea in China that it isn't going to happen. He's also started a company that is to connect the human brain to a computer. So in other words, you can run your computer with your brain. Now, there is such a thing as biofeedback, and you can actually control your heartbeat. You can control a lot of things by thinking about what you're doing, and they can measure them on your body. So, I mean, there is this thing called biofeedback. I can't, I'm certainly not a computer expert, I can't say that he can't make the brain connect to a computer, but I'm somewhat doubtful, but he started a company to do that. Some of the less crazy things he's doing, he is about to produce a $250,000 sports car. I mean, that makes sense. I believe that's what a Maserati costs, so that's okay. He's now going to make trucks that will go 500-mile range, so he wants to get into the trucking business with electric cars. He has, however, a cash problem. In the third quarter of this year, he burned through $1.4 billion. So he pays real money for everything that he's doing. One of the more interesting scams, I really want you to think about this one. You may have read that in southern Australia, that is now powered by wind and solar. And I'm sure you're aware the wind turbines don't work when the wind doesn't blow, and the solar cells don't work when the sun isn't out. They've had terrible problems with brownouts and blackouts in South Australia. That's one of the states of Australia. And so he told the South Australian government that he could build them a battery that would support all of the homes in the areas that are having problems with energy. And he said, if I can't, I'll build you a battery that'll support 30,000 homes, and I'll do it under 100 days. In less than 100 days, the world's biggest battery. If I succeed, you pay me $50 million, and if I do not, it's free. So he built the battery in 51 days, and it works. But let me tell you what it does. It powers 30,000 homes for 1 hour. Do the arithmetic. $50 million, 30,000 homes, simple long division, and you find out that the cost of powering each home for 1 hour was $1,666. Brownouts tend to last more than an hour. It's crazy, but he's gotten a lot of publicity for it, but I don't think anyone's done the arithmetic. It actually virtually makes no sense at all, but it's happening. But let's go to his space exploration company, which I deem a huge success. A huge success. He boasted that he could reuse rockets, that he could bring the rockets back and land them on a raft in the ocean. And he has succeeded in doing that, and he's reused rockets. He has got $10 billion in contracts for his company. Last year, he made 27 launches. He's planning on 44 launches this year and one a week in 2019. Now, his goal is to ferry astronauts to the orbiting space station. He has not yet qualified. Now, he got in early, but he does have competition. You may or may not be aware that Jeff Bezos, the guy that owns Amazon, has his own rocket company. Boeing Aircraft also has a rocket company, so he's now in competition with them, but he's fairly sure he can do things that they can't. And he proved it about 2 weeks ago. He sent off the largest payload rocket in 50 years. I mean, since we put people on the moon, we have not launched large payloads. But he did it just a few weeks ago, and he's such a showman. He put a Tesla motor vehicle in the nose cone of the rocket and was able then to release it, and he claims it will orbit the sun. I don't know that it matters whether it does or not, but it was quite a showy thing to do, and the fact that he succeeded with the rocket is terrific. However, there's a question of whether there's really any commercial value to such a large rocket, because payloads are getting smaller and lighter. So the fact that he basically assembled 27 smaller rockets together, and it worked. That he's a genius and does things that can't be done is absolutely without question. But the most exciting thing he's doing, and some of you may be really interested in this, he has said that he will send 100 people to Mars in 2024, and that the trip will take between 3 and 6 months, and he'll charge each of the 100 people, and listen to this, if there's some really rich people, adventurous, you can go for $200,000. I mean, that actually seems reasonable to me. However, I don't imagine you can expect to come back. Now, that's interesting. He actually says we'll have some village that we'll have on Mars, and we'll make fuel, and then he'll send new parts, and he's saying that we will retrieve you. I think that's rather doubtful, but that is his plan, and I can tell you I'm sure you all agree with me, that isn't going to happen. But he's saying that he is going to do it. He just likes to do this, and he says he's going to start building a spaceship next summer. So he just keeps making these ideas that aren't going to happen. In fact, I worry about him. Okay, why does his stock sell at such a high level that the company's worth $50 billion, the same more or less of what General Motors is worth? It's because he has what I call a religious following. People really have confidence. It's really a religion because they have faith that he will ultimately succeed. I believe he is going to start failing, and those people will lose the confidence that they have in a religious way. The stock will crater. I sincerely worry about his mental health down the road when these things fail and enough people finally figure out, he can't do what he says he's going to do. He makes so many claims that one of them came back to bite him just a couple of weeks ago. His solar company that's part of, it's called Solar City, but it's part of Tesla, was recently fined $30 million for claiming tax credits they do not deserve. Everything to do with solar gets tax advantages, and Solar City was claiming things that were not legitimate, and the government fined it $30 million. So he's starting to run into problems. Simultaneously with his trip to Mars, he's developing an airplane that will fly 18,000 miles an hour. Now that's doable. The way you do it is you send the airplane up out of the atmosphere and you fly it above the atmosphere at 18,000 miles an hour, and then you re-enter the atmosphere, so he will be able to reach from wherever he fires it up anywhere in the world in about 40 minutes. And when asked how much he charged for a ticket, he said, pretty much the same as any ticket you'd buy today. I mean, is he crazy? I don't know. I kind of think so. Let's talk about the Tesla motor car. Anyone here own a Tesla? Oh, I'm sorry, because it's gorgeous. Drives great. I mean, I hear this from friends. I've not been in one, but I've never heard a bad thing about the Tesla. I think I mentioned already that it lists on the website at $71,000, but the average price is over $91,000, which kind of reminded me when I was a kid, you could buy a Volkswagen for $1,400. Seats were extra. And I think that's the way a Tesla is at $71,000. You wouldn't really take it out. But here's where he's running into the biggest trouble. Last year, he produced 84,000 Teslas, averaging near $100,000 each. For 3 years now, he has predicted that he is going to build a $35,000 Tesla, and he would build 500,000 of them in a year. Now, if all the big cars you can build in a year is 84,000, and you're getting $100,000 for them, how could you conceivably build 500,000, $35,000 cars that will also go 200 miles on a charge? So around now, everybody is really starting to question the logistics. He had predicted that by the last month of last year, he would be up to producing 5,000 a month. In the entire year, he produced 260 $35,000 Teslas, and he's finally admitting that it's a little harder than he says. He was quoted as saying he's now in production hell. And I think that's exactly correct. But the mistake he's made, which is interesting, he only hires genius engineers. And production is essentially plain vanilla. You don't need to have a genius IQ to figure out how to produce more and more cars on an assembly line. And he didn't hire any of those people because they probably weren't smart enough. So he's way behind, and yet he still maintains that by the middle of this year, he'll be up to 5,000 a week. That isn't going to happen again. So he keeps making these predictions that can't come true. But the worst of it may be that quite a few engineering companies have bought the few $35,000 Teslas that he has made and sold. And they have taken it apart and reversed engineering and said it is physically impossible to build that car for under $41,000. So he's setting himself up to lose a lot of money because he has taken 500,000 reservations for the $35,000 car, each worth $1,000. $1,000. So that sounds like a lot of money. He's got $500 million in cash from all the people that reserved the $35,000 car. But $500 million is not so much when I think I told you that in the third quarter last year he spent $1.4 billion. So he has a cash problem. Last August he floated $1.8 billion in bonds to raise more money. He sold bonds worth $1.8 billion, which makes his long-term debt now $9.5 billion. That is serious money. So he's beginning to run into a wall of needing cash. I actually don't think that'll defeat him somehow. He'll figure that out. One of the ways he thinks he can start to succeed, he got permission from the Chinese government to build a factory, that he didn't need a partner. Any company in America that wants to make something in China has to have a Chinese partner. But he was able to work his way in China, and they're letting him build his own factory there. Well, wages in China are not what they once were, but they're still way lower than us. So that's one of the ways he thinks he can escape and get, many, many more cars produced at a low cost. But let's just talk about the electric car. Why do we need an electric car? There would be no electric car industry if it wasn't for the belief that carbon dioxide, man-caused carbon dioxide from cars, factories, and power plants was warming the atmosphere, and that warm is bad, despite the fact that 10 times more people die from extreme cold than from extreme heat, and nobody's predicted that the temperature would rise more than a degree or two. Global warming is the biggest fraud ever perpetrated on society. The government spends an average of $6 billion a year to support mathematical models, equations that predict the temperature of the planet 100 years from now. The weather people here in Milwaukee were very good at predicting snow for last night. They're probably, well, they really weren't very good today because they predicted another inch today, and that did not happen. But 7 days out, your TV weatherman is 56% accurate. You can toss a coin. So you can plan fairly well on a couple days on the weather report, but not a week out. And yet, the government spends $6 billion supporting 107 mathematical models produced at different academic institutions that predict the temperature of the planet 100 years out. Now, none of those 107 mathematical models were able to predict backwards when we already knew the weather. None of them have been able, they've been around for 15 years, and none of them have been able to predict 10 years out, or 5 years out, or 15 years. They're all wrong. So what the government does is they average out 107 errors and say that's the right answer. If that makes sense to you, you're going to have to explain it to me. It is the biggest scam perpetrated on society. It's about money. It's about power. If you're at a university, you are either getting money for global warming or you're in the history department and you dare not open your mouth and foul up the physics department that's getting money. The Heartland Institute is the #1 name in the world trying to expose the climate change scam. And I am proud to say that I have written a number of papers on this scam, and Mr. Trump got hold of them during his debates. He quoted a lot from them. And the second most exciting telephone call I ever got was from the Trump group 9 days after the election, asking if I would develop a PowerPoint explaining to Mr. Trump the science of why man isn't warming the globe, and I said I would be happy to do that. Of course, I went to smarter people than me at the Heartland Institute, and we put together this terrific PowerPoint. and they asked me when I would be able to come in and present it to Mr. Trump. Well, that was exciting. I was going to get to meet Mr. Trump. Unfortunately, we did too good a job on the PowerPoint, and it turned out to be self-explanatory. And they didn't need me to come in and explain it to them, so I missed my chance. All right, that was the second most exciting telephone call. The most exciting telephone call occurred 2 hours before Mr. Trump, at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, gave a speech in the Rose Garden announcing that the United States was pulling out of the Paris Accord, which was just going to... Now you got to hear the call. It was absolutely stunning for me. I got a telephone call from the White House at 1 p.m. and all they said was, "You won. You won." Because Ivanka Trump, his daughter, was violently opposed to pulling out. The Secretary of State, quickly, what's his name? Tillerson. He didn't want to pull out. And me and the Heartland group won. And we've saved the country trillions of dollars. And it's wonderful. And he's really stuck to that. On the back of your car, also, are my 10 favorite reasons why we're not warming the globe. Gee, every seat here is full. Don't let me, when you're all finished, don't let me find a card on the table. Make sure you put it in your pocket, and if you want more, I can get you more. But let's talk about electric cars. Why do we need them? Well, I just told you, they're only there because of carbon dioxide. But what problem does an electric car solve? Are they cheaper than internal combustion engines? Do they drive further? Are they better in warm or cold weather? What do we need an electric car for? Well, now I'm going to ask you a question. I want a real answer. If you have the nerve to raise your hand and yell out an answer. In the year 1917, what percentage of cars were electric?
Probably half.
You say half? Do I have another vote? 13%. One more.
86.
86, okay. Half wins, the answer is 38%. 1917, 38% of our cars were electric. What does that tell you? It didn't ever make sense in competing with internal combustion engines. Now, we will have electric cars, but I'll make a prediction that I can't be off by more than a few percentage. There will always be people that like electric cars because it signals how green they are. The average Prius owner is less interested in how the car performs than they are in what it says about them. It's signaling something about... So I'm going to say that in 2030, 10% of our cars will be electric. If I'm off, it's only a few percentage points, one way or the other. But they're going to be around. I had predicted wind and solar would go away the minute the tax breaks are over. And I predicted years ago they were going to get over. I no longer am sure when and if. The Wall Street Journal published an article of mine a couple of years ago about wind turbines, and I'm sure they published it because I wrote kind of a word picture, and I said, when the government subsidies for wind turbines end, the United States is going to be one gigantic sculpture garden. Because they're all going to be there. They're not going to be turning because there is no money to take them down. There'll be no money to maintain them. That prediction still goes. I mean, someday, I don't know when that is. I used to think it was within 5 or 6 years. I don't know. It could be 20 years now. That wind and solar industries would end the day after the subsidies end, but their lobbies are incredibly powerful. So it just isn't going to happen. But when another statistic you might like to know, I can't go into detail about it, it's very complicated, but the construction of the battery in the Tesla, the lithium electric battery in the Tesla, The supply chain, thank you, Christy. I had a long discussion of how you calculate how much CO2 is made from an electric battery, and she just said the supply chain, if you calculate all the CO2 emitted in the supply chain up to the battery, it's about the same amount as driving an internal combustion car for 8 years. So there's no saving in carbon dioxide. There's no benefit to the planet. But when the public finds that out, which they're about, they will someday, they'll realize that they've spent billions of dollars supporting electric cars to no benefit whatever. A little bit about self-driving cars. I've been studying them forever. I'm just unsure how many self-driving cars we're going to have. I'm not sure people really want to get in a car where they don't have control over the wheel. I think there'll be the improvement in our cars to be able for the person in charge of the car to not do much work and let the car do the work. I think that will be big. But I don't think people will get in a car in which they have no control over. Although I do believe that these car hailing companies like Uber will probably map out certain areas where they're able to run self-driving cars. But that's going to be interesting. Tesla leads in that area. Tesla has computerized more cars. They also killed somebody in the effort when their automation was not quite good enough. But they seem to have solved the problem. I think they have. And they were not blamed actually for negligence. But it's just interesting what the future holds for all of these things. I'll close, well, I'm not going to quite close. I forgot to tell you that before we go to the question period, I'm going to show you why Elon Musk and I have something in common. And it isn't our money. I don't think it's our brains either. It's that we are both risk takers. So I thought I'd show you an amusing skydive. It will take about 2.5 minutes. And you have to be deadly quiet because the music's better than the video. And we'll turn the lights off or make it dark. But before that, I want to give you one fascinating statistic that you will also remember. Tesla Motor Company, wanting to make sure that Mr. Musk continues to run Tesla forever, wrote him a brand new contract that says when Tesla is worth $650 billion, they'll give him $59 billion. It's worth $50 billion now, supported by a religion. And they're actually thinking in terms of what's 13 times its value, going to $650 billion and giving him $55 billion. He already owns 20% of Tesla. He's already a billionaire many times over. But they want to keep him. But the whole company is crazy. And as I said, I worry about it. I mean, why do you worry about a billionaire? Because I really think the time will come when his mental health will be challenged. A number of really, really bright people have done away with themselves. Many of you may have heard of Aubrey McClendon, who was the largest oil and gas person in the eastern part of the United States, and he ran into all kinds of trouble and eventually ran his car at the age of 56 into a wall. They investigated and said, no, it was an accident. I will never not believe that he killed himself. And I worry about Musk. I mean, the day will come when, genius, there's another side to genius, and it can be insanity. All right, Dan is going to show you why I'm somewhat similar. We can turn all the lights off now. Now, you've got to be absolutely silent. Let's see, I have to get the microphone. The music is kind of the most fun of the film. I missed the disc by 30 feet and land on my ass.
Even better.
Thank you, Mike. I think I'm right on the minute, and we have 15 minutes for questions, and I guess I'll handle them. Right in the middle there.
The Hyperloop. I admire Musk because he's donating and he's giving a lot of money to people that are taking off on ideas. What's your concept about the future of the Hyperloop?
I think it'll never happen. First of all, part of my undergraduate degree was in geological engineering. And tunneling is one of the most hazardous and difficult things. I know all the history of the tunnels under the Hudson River, how many people died, building the tunnels. He has a boring machine, and there are boring machines, and the cost of it, I think he'll never get all the money. He's never going to get from Washington, D.C. The problems, I think, are insurmountable unless you had unlimited money and unlimited time. Yeah?
Must it be bored underground? Can it not be above the surface? Like a monorail or something? Straight line.
Well, he's never suggested that. Well, I suppose it could. On the surface, it could. It would still be incredibly expensive. The number of people you could get through.
Has to be a straight line.
Say again?
Has to be a straight line. If you use gravity to drive it through.
No, it's not gravity. You build a vacuum pump at one end. You
Well,
suck
right.
it through. It's not gravity at all.
So gravity doesn't pull it halfway and then
No.
momentum carries
No.
the rest of the way?
No. It's a 100% vacuum. But your point about doing it on the surface, I know he did a demonstration of a few hundred yards in Las Vegas on the surface. And it was only moderately successful. He ran into a lot of problems. But your point is, it's theoretically possible on the surface, definitely not underground. But I mean, to him, he wants it to be a whole new way of transportation. Yes?
Two questions. The first one is, are you shorting his stock? And the second one is, since you're from Illinois, do you have anything to share with us with respect to, I think it's Fermi Lab or one of the labs there that's doing work on a new internal combustion engine with two pistons per cylinder? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, it is the Fermi Lab, and they are working on stuff. And I would say there's always room for improvement, maybe, and that is interesting. I thought you were going to ask me about the governor of Illinois. Illinois is the most corrupt state in the union. I guess California and New York follow, but the state is run by a fellow by the name of Madigan, who's been the state legislative head for 35 years, and I'm just amazed that Governor Rauner is willing to take another shot at 4 more years. But anyway, that's a separate. But it is. You're right. I think it's nothing is. It's hard to reach the end of any scientific thing. There are always improvements. In fact, one of the neat things is that we're attacked at Heartland on the global warming. I'm sure you've read it. That 97% of all scientists, you think man is causing global warming. That's the most absurd thing in the world. It's not. If you really knew how they came up with that number, it's absolutely a joke. I don't even think the majority of scientists believe that. But Einstein famously said, when they wrote a book by 100 people supported a book that said Einstein was wrong. And Einstein said, gee, why do you need 100 people? It only takes one person to disprove me. So the whole concept that you need a lot of people to agree. Science isn't done by consensus. But anyway, another question. Yes?
If you had 20 minutes with a cup of coffee with Elon Musk, what would you say? What would be your top 2 or 3 points over these 20 minutes, assuming he's listening to you and not talking to you?
It's interesting because I know exactly what I'd say, and I've kind of already said it to you. I certainly wouldn't be asking him science questions because he'd probably be way over my head. I think I'm of I'm a guy of average intelligence who works very hard, and he's clearly a genius. I suspect my IQ is much above average. I would ask him, why he keeps making claims and projections that are getting more and more outlandish, where the chance of success, is very small. And I then would probably zero in on his plans to go to Mars, which are patently absurd. I mean, as an example, he said he'd get there in 3 to 6 months, and the difference has to do with how the planets line up. NASA says 6 to 12 months is the minimum, and they're not even considering sending anyone to Mars for at least 10 years, and he's staked his claim. He actually said 2022, and then he said, well, maybe that's a little quick. 2024 is more realistic.
Do you think that he has a response to that? Do you think that this is fiction? Or he's in the world that believes this? What do you think?
I think he would answer me as follows. He'd say, well, if you don't dream, you don't accomplish anything. I think he wouldn't give me statistics as why he's going to succeed. He would say, everything I've done has come from dreams, and I've made many of them happen, and he certainly is. I mean, SpaceX is astounding to me, and even the Tesla car is a work of beauty. I'm pretty sure that's what he'd say. And boy, would I love to have 20 minutes with Elon Musk. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. He is a gamer. Let's say he games the system. When I said, is he a fraud or a genius? He's clearly a genius. He is a fraud, but not in the way Bernie Madoff was a fraud. He's not really trying to take people to the cleaners or hurt anybody. I keep asking people, there's an expression, your grasp exceeds your reach, or vice versa. I mean, that's him. I mean, he's reaching farther than he can actually grasp what he wants to do.
I think that's a fair answer. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Next question. All the way in the back.
Thank you. I think we've all grown up in a science class that we've understood for millions of years that the planet Earth is taking care of CO2 with plants. Plants turn CO2 into oxygen, et cetera, et cetera. What we are going through right now is about 14,000 acres of deforestation per day. And one of my arguments is that we cannot make enough windmills or solar panels or electric cars to compensate for the deforestation third world countries are doing. We plant in the U.S., we're required by law. Third world countries aren't.
Okay, I do not mean to insult you, but everything you just said is wrong. In fact, it's almost the opposite. There is not. Deforestation occurs in very poor areas where people take down an acre of forest to grow a subsistence farm. In fact, because of the increased CO2, and we've clearly gone from 280 after World War II to 400 today, because of that, green matter is increasing everywhere on the globe. I mean, we have fabulous satellite pictures to show, for instance, in Africa in the last 20 years, we've had an increase in green matter over 38% of the continent, and a decrease over 12%. That's a net gain of 26%. The evidence now that we are greening more because of carbon dioxide rather than losing green matter from forestation. And if you want to, you have my card, send me an email. I'll send you the publications and the diagrams and the graphs that show that. Another question right up front here. Yes?
I heard something about the Tesla car that's going up in orbit, but some scientists were worried about the bacteria that might be in the car. Did you hear anything about that?
I did not, but I can't imagine. I'm not surprised at all that someone would, say that we would be contaminating whatever. I would imagine if, in fact, the car is really on a sun orbit, I'm going to guess it'll burn up, before it gets around the sun, but I don't know. But spreading bacteria is a problem. I can't imagine that one little car is going to change space in any significant or worrisome way. Next question. Yes?
Have you calculated the cost of ethanol at CO2?
Yes. Ethanol produces a lot of CO2. I hope there are not a lot of farmers here. I don't want to make a lot of enemies. Ethanol really doesn't have any redeeming qualities other than increasing the price of corn, which is so desperately low, it's almost impossible to be in the black as a farmer. And so the fact that we make ethanol and it makes fuel that we have no use for because it produces 2/3 as much mileage. However, we're now starting to export ethanol. And ethanol is a good form of energy for countries that don't have it. And so the future of ethanol is export, although we have subsidies for ethanol in the form of requirements that there has to be, we use ethanol as an oxygenate, and you have to blend a certain amount of ethanol in all your gas. And every state has different standards, but if it were not the forced use of ethanol, it would go under. But it does help. I don't know whether it's 25 cents the price of corn, probably somewhere in there. I don't think it's 50 cents, but the farmers are in bad shape. But ethanol has no redeeming qualities for our fuel supply. We're awash in natural gas and oil, and I suspect we'll be in a wash forever. In fact, I've made a prediction and have for years that because we are now the richest energy country in the world, and within a couple of years we will outproduce Russia and Saudi Arabia, and we have so much that I predict that the price of gasoline, regular at the pump, will not exceed $2.50 for 6 consecutive months for the rest of your lives and your grandchildren's lives. But it was pointed out to me last night that I could be wrong if states put a lot of taxes on gasoline. So net, without taxes, there's no way we can have $3 gasoline for any length of time because we just put more wells into production. Yes?
Maybe a little bit off the mark here, but since we're talking about oil, many people have pointed out that it was extremely unlikely that a whole bunch of millions of dinosaurs got together in certain spots and turned into oil somehow, that oil is actually an abiotic process.
Correct.
How do you feel about that?
I'm 100% positive oil does not come from dead dinosaurs. Oil is made inside the interior of the earth. And the reason the Russians have been way stronger than we've been in oil, because they figured that out 70 years ago. Russia looks for major fractures in hard rock that extend, deep in the earth, and it's mining oil that's coming up from the inner core. It has nothing to do with dead dinosaurs. The fellow who really opened this up scientifically in this country was a guy named Thomas Gold at Cornell University some 30 years ago, but our oil industry never, picked up on it. And now they find that there's natural gas and oil in most all shale. And now that we don't have to drill vertically, we can make our wells curve. For your information, it takes 3,000 feet to make a vertical well turn a corner because it's steel pipe, and steel pipe only flexes 3 degrees every 100 feet. So to go 90 degrees, you need 30 times 100 or 3,000 feet to go horizontal. But, it's just about everywhere. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal today from some small gas company saying, we don't have near as much shale gas as people think, and the future isn't that bright. My God, we've only developed it in North Dakota and Texas and the Marcellus in Pennsylvania. We haven't tapped the country. It's everywhere. And it's everywhere in the rest of the world. The only reason they're not developing it is because we're the only country in the world, if you own the land, you own the minerals below the land. In every other country, the government owns the minerals. So if you don't own the minerals below, why would you invite people to drill on your land? But eventually that'll change. Yes?
Is that to say that fossil fuels are renewable? They come from the center?
It is definitely to say that. But how much renewable, in other words, how much you get back over time, I don't think we know. But we know it's renewable. We have proof of that. I mean, we've gone into oil fields that were shut down 30 years ago. And we went back in saying, well, the price of oil is up, maybe we can squeeze a little more out. Well, we found a lot more than a little more. We've definitely found oil fields that have refilled. But what the rate of renewing is, I have no idea, but you're absolutely right.
It is.
In the middle of nowhere, and you're off the grid and you're in a windy place and you build a wind turbine and get energy out of it. The bird kills are unbelievable. In the old days, we wanted to protect the golden eagle. Now we give permits. You can kill 50,000 golden eagles a year on your wind farm for the next 30 years. It's absolutely insane. We've shut down oil wells where 6 birds fell into a waste disposal pit and died, and they shut down the oil field, and yet we're giving permits to kill thousands of birds. More than that, there's a health problem. If you live within 1,500 feet of a wind turbine, people are really coming up ill very frequently as a result of the thumping. I mean, within 15 feet, you can either hear the thumping or you can feel it. I'm sure you've ridden by a car where some young kids were playing a boom box at a real low level. Well, that's kind of what a wind turbine is like. So they're absolutely terrible. But their lobby is strong, and the public, by and large, thinks they're green, just like solar, and so the government just keeps supporting them. Maybe someday it'll change. Right. Thorium is a way of producing atomic energy that isn't really any better than any other ways, but there are people always saying we can have nuclear energy using thorium instead of uranium, and it's true, but again, the infrastructure is too difficult. Nuclear power is absolutely the best form of power there is. It's actually the safest form. That's a whole other lecture, but the anti-nuclear people in this country have pretty much stopped it, so we're going to go ultimately from 104 nuclear power plants, probably, I'm going to guess in the next 20 years we'll be down to about 65 of them. We're building 2 in South Carolina, 2 in Georgia that may or may not ever be completed. They're building them all over the world. Coal and nuclear are growing crazy all over the world. Not so here, although we still hope to save the coal industry. But new forms of nuclear power, there are many new forms of building better nuclear power plants, but we're not likely to use them in this country. I want to make one announcement. For any of you, many of you have to get home and leave, but I'll hang around. If anyone wants to sit and chat with me, I'll stay for hours. I'm staying in the hotel. I don't have an early flight, so I'll let you know that. So we